I'm Tom Madrecki, Vice President of the Supply Chain for Consumer Brands Association. We're excited to have you join us for today's industry solution. This series provides insights for CPG companies presented by premier partners of consumer brands. I'm excited today to be joined by Jeriad Zoghby and Matt Campbell, Managing Directors at Accenture. Jeriad leads Accenture's Interactive for consumer goods industry, which includes helping companies make the shifts in marketing and commerce models. Matt focuses on helping Fortune 500 consumer goods clients develop and implement value-led digital consumer and transformation programs. During today's session, Jeriad and Matt will share key learnings from other industries, how to embed brand into your e-commerce experiences, and how companies can leverage consumer data to drive category growth in digital channels. We save time at the end of today's sessions for audience Q&As. If you have a question during today's session, please just submit it using the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. Jeriad and Matt, we are so excited to have you join us and to share your expertise with the attendees today. Kick it off.
Thank you, Tom. We're thrilled for the opportunity here with this esteemed list of clients. As we kind of talk about e-commerce, right? It's just been a jet rocket coming out of COVID here. And a lot of times our clients are now coming to us to say, okay, the plan is launched, it's got to keep flying. How do I really shift the gears and orient to where we think the puck is going? And that's what we'll talk a little bit about today. If you go down to the next slide, maybe a theme I would call it is from scrappy, where our clients in COVID were throwing internal resources, external resources, temps, consultants, you have it, at commerce, to stepping back now and kind of saying, okay, how do I get to scale and do that in the right way? So we'll talk about going from scrappy to scaled. If you go down one more slide, quick video to kind of bring this to life quickly here. Awesome. So as you can see, this is just one brand, right? Danimals smoothies, across the different marketplaces that are out there. The management of that can get overwhelming pretty quickly, right? So if I try and take a scrappy approach to managing even just Danimals, let alone all my brands, all my categories, all my assortments across those channels, I need to kind of rethink my approach to doing this. So I just thought that brings it to life, the challenge that we're all faced with right now. If you go down one more slide, if you could. One more, there we go. I'll talk a little bit about how we start thinking about getting to scaled capabilities for commerce. First, orienting around the customer teams, and we know that Amazon's been doing it a while, but the other folks are not far behind and advancing quickly. The Walmarts, the Targets, the Krogers, your clubs are call them the must-wins. Throw an Insta in there as well, and the algorithm to win on each of those is different, and it's always changing. On the left side, we think about our brand, and Jeriad will talk a little bit about this, but how do I start to tell the story of my brand across these marketplaces? And in order to do that, I need to make sure I've managed my resources, my teams. I've got the ability to accelerate capabilities, people, assets, where and when I need to. I need to make sure this is fed by insights and analytics. I need to make sure I've got the right content telling that brand story. In order to do that, this is all kind of powered by technology and then integrated with the back end of supply. This is also very cross-functional in nature, from everything from strategy to talent to my partner ecosystem to how do I prioritize demand, do this in an agile way. How do I rethink my funding and my governance model here, and then drive the change for the organization. If we go down one more, if I double click into some of these capabilities, Spending is critical as well. We all know that trade traditionally is becoming less and less effective, but that retailer doesn't want to give it up, right? So how do I think about a different joint business plan and collaboration, which starts with getting a hold of what am I actually spending? We just finished it's a POC we did for a big CPG client for Target and Walmart. They didn't even have a handle on what they were spending because it was across the different agencies, across the different data sources, internally and externally. So starting with that visibility and then getting into optimization and now getting into integrated optimization across traditional, call it SRM, now combined with digital. So I can start to shift to where I need to spend to drive the ROI. Driving that experience on the digital shelf, it's no longer enough just to have A+ content. The market is caught up to that. That's still important, but it's kind of a table stakes capability. We'll talk a little bit about how do I rethink the experience online. Building that intelligence, what's happening across each of those marketplaces we talked about by brand down to a very micro level, and starting to kind of think about how I create a cockpit of intelligence or a command center to manage this business, which can then drive innovation. So if I understand what's going on, what the consumers are saying across my brands, my products, I can start to drive innovation. Elevating and integrating e-commerce across the company. This is now a CEO level agenda item, whereas I'd say, a year ago it was for some certain segments of CPG, but not for others. And then along with the innovation, how do I drive innovation, assortment, packaging, and fulfillment as well, and start to scale that and not make it an afterthought. So Jared, with that kind of setup, I'll turn it over to you.
Very cool. Thanks, Matt. If we go to the next slide real quick, so this is the second. So we've got 3 topics, couldn't agree more with Matt that first topic's really table stakes. You got to get the architecture right. Got to get your content operations right. You got to get there's a lot there to do, but it's not going to be enough long-term to avoid being the commoditization risk, just to be blunt. So I kind of alluded, I don't know if somebody saw this, but alluded to the infamous George Clooney video. We're going to play that in just a second. The job there is to kind of show why it's so important that brand and creative makes its way in here. Now you have to think about it. What's happened historically is digital commerce was born out of the sell side of the organization, right? Walmart created Walmart.com. We built it up there, but a lot of things we see on that side doesn't necessarily look like traditional sales or trade. It looks a lot like marketing. And there's a huge risk when these worlds aren't connected. So James, if you could go ahead and click the George Clooney video, enjoy this for a second.
This is George. Nespresso uses George in all their advertising around the world.
George?
In their print ads, in their fancy stores, where there's an incredible brand experience. So let's buy some coffee online on Nespresso.com, on Bed Bath & Beyond, and on Amazon. But hang on, this is not the same experience. This raises a fundamental question. Seriously, why isn't he here? Nespresso brewed all this great George content, but not everyone is serving it. Are all marketplaces not using their George? What happens when we start talking to a new generation? A generation that will never see any of the great George TV ads. A target that skips over the 2-minute films. A target that does all their discovery and shopping online.
I guess you'll have to watch to the end of the video.
Also, 78% of customer searches don't include a brand, according to Amazon. Does that mean your brand needs to extend into the marketplace? Wait, we found George. He's trending in his first social and e-commerce campaign, where he's helping Puerto Rico's coffee growers. A campaign that fully integrates the power of the brand for a great cause.
Everyone who tastes it goes, oh, I get it.
And he's even in the Nespresso Coffee PDP with Hamilton. That's sold out. So next time you create an omnichannel brand experience, make sure nobody's asking.
So now, obviously, we were trying to be very provocative with this video. Oh, don't move forward just yet. I apologize. The CPA folks are probably not happy with me having that on the screen. I do apologize for that. But this is a really important message, not what's on the screen. Two things. One is that not bringing brand into this marketplace is a huge risk, especially for the larger brands, because someone my age has brand equity built up, right? I've seen tons of advertisement for Coca-Cola, for Oreos, for Huggies, for Tide. And because of that, I have a substantial store of brand equity, but the newer generation does not. This is not only not only have they opted out of much of the traditional advertising channels, but they are not just buying products in these channels, they're learning about products in these channels. And one of the things we're seeing is not only those search, I talked about non-branded search, but more importantly, as many of you already know the fact, more people are beginning their product research in these channels than they are in Google anymore. So if you want to learn about product, where do you go? You have to go to Amazon. You're looking at ratings, reviews, features, highlights. And in fact, we did a study the last 2 years. We're doing a third one this year in 10 countries. And last year, for example, we asked how many people had recall of product pages for name brand products in channels like Amazon, and it was 84%. And that's probably not surprising. You all probably remember imagery or features or ratings and reviews that you saw on Amazon recently. And then we asked those same people if they could remember the TV ads associated with those products, and it was only 28%. And so we're seeing this dramatic shift, especially in the younger generation, that brand equity is here more so than it is anywhere. But there's one other point, and that is that these worlds of commerce and sales versus marketing and creative have historically been separated, and this is a huge risk, because a lot of times the assets we find in the commerce channels are not very good. And a lot of it has to do with your organizational operating model. So I just wanted to highlight both of those things. I think they're very critical in order to fix this, but we wanted to show some great work examples. So James, if you go to the next slide, and do apologize for
this is
folks have known about this, but we want to show some examples from various industries. If you're in the alcohol bev space, it has always amazed me. Two of the clients, to Matt's point, this has become a CEO topic. With one CEO and one on Alcobev and another one with their C-suite, we sat down and we showed, and neither was ABI, and we highlighted some of the great work ABI is doing. This is in Target. They do it really great across retail channels. You've got great header banner and also feature visualization, really kind of bringing out the power of the product. They're spending on the full width images and videos to really kind of own that page. This is the below the fold, which is on the right side, but they're also doing cross-sell carousels. And this is one of the most important things if you're an Alcobev, because you cannot advertise in these channels, as you know. But to miss the opportunity that someone who is looking at your product page gets to know that you have a hard seltzer, that you have other flavors, that you have other varieties is a huge risk, even if they're familiar with it, to remind them of that if they're planning for a party or something. And if you're not in the Alcobev space and you're not doing this, then even a greater shame on you, because you have more flexibility, less limitations. But I did want to call this out because it is a brilliant workaround to some of the limitations in advertising while still brilliant. You can see there's video that's brought into this, great imagery, great feature visualization, and the cross-sell all in below the fold, which is allowing you to bypass some of the restrictions that you have. If we go to the next slide, James. This is just kind of looking across, because high tech especially has been very, not surprising, right? They've been dealing with this a lot longer. But I wanted to highlight that this is across channels too. This isn't an Amazon specific thing. You see the great work Nintendo and Apple are doing in Amazon. They're taking those premier pages and really kind of blowing it out and really, on Target there. And then you look at Walmart, what Braun is doing there in Frontline. This is them getting out ahead of the game to build this stuff up, but the power of building your brand there is huge. And especially when you think about the commoditization risk of just looking like I got a bunch of pack shots out there, some basic features. The younger consumers are looking. They want to believe in the brand. They want to know what you stand for. They want to know that you're worried about sustainability. They want to worry about sourcing, and you need to bring this out. And I'm sorry, because I have the Amazon and Target labels backwards. And then you see the power of that Amazon one all the way to the right with Nerf and Play-Doh just truly owning those new premier homepages. They're just blowing it out there with the brand experience. Now, these are the easy ones. So I wanted to show one that was a little bit more provocative for the next two. So we'll go to the next slide. This is a small, agile brand, Quest Nutrition. Some of you may be familiar with it. They were recently acquired by another smaller company. But if you look there, this is a true brand omnichannel experience. You've got the homepage all the way to the left with direct to consumer. So they're selling directly to the consumer. Two things to point out here. One, they have their own subscription model and they're encouraging you to sign up for it, right? Free shipping, give you a discount. And then they don't have find the product, they have find the store, right? So they are literally saying, if you want to find our product locally at a store, I'll help you find it. If you want to find it online, I don't have an option for you because I want you to buy it from me if you're going to buy it online. So they're literally protecting their D2C space while still making sure it's easy for consumers to find, buy, and consume their products. Digitally, I'm going to take care of you. You can buy it, you can do subscription, but if you want to do it physically, I'll find the store nearest to you to get it. You get to the marketplaces though. So even though they're not pushing people to these marketplaces in retail, they're still owning this experience there. So this product page here with Quest Nutrition for the peanut butter cup, a couple things here. You've got the above the fold is the big image. The smaller image on the right-hand side bottom is there below the fold. So you can see they're doing a great job bringing out some of the creative work, some of the product features, but also the cross-sell down there, a little almost like a carousel. And the left side is actually their Amazon digital storefront. So they're investing heavily in this. They're going after the higher end storefront. And to be honest, they're investing in the quality of the brand experience. It's also worth noting that, and I was really impressed by this, that they're actually making the effort to answer the Q&A. We'll come back to that at a later time, but they're answering the Q&A in the Amazon pages too. So they're trying to own that brand experience holistically within marketplaces like Amazon. And then you get to e-retail and you can see they're also investing heavily there to own that brand experience. So the reason I wanted to show this is Quest Nutrition isn't going to have a huge budget to do this stuff. Right? Here they have a brand omnichannel experience from direct to consumer through marketplaces, through e-retail, and they're still finding ways to do this. And this is really important because if you're not, the other thing that these brands have, these smaller brands, is they're very authentic, right? They do a great job with their origin stories. They do a great job talking about whether sustainability or sourcing or something else. And as a company who's buying, or as a consumer who's buying, this versus a bunch of random pack shots can make a huge difference in which one I'm willing to try. So it's very important to see how these smaller brands are being very agile. It's worth noting, they also don't have the legacy walls established, which comes as you get bigger and you become more streamlined and more efficient. But those legacy walls, not having them allows them to be a lot more agile in the space. All right, so, and then I'm gonna show you one last one. If we go to the next page, this is probably the one that should maybe make you a little nervous. This is what I would call the digitally native brands. I'm listening to there, and I apologize, hopefully the video is not blocking it, but it's Aterian and Thrasio. Thrasio is the fastest unicorn status. They run around just collecting all these little micro brands and putting them together and building them. But I wanted to profile Aterian here. They used to be called the Mohawk Group. I actually had their CEO present with me 3 years ago at Adobe just to show people what was starting to happen. And it really blew people's minds. But this is their homepage. This does not look like a consumer goods company. It looks like an Adobe or Salesforce company if they were even more higher end and more provocative and more technology oriented than like an Adobe or Salesforce is. So two things to point out, though. This is a consumer goods company. You'll see in the bottom left-hand side there, they have over 2,000 products in the portfolio. We'll come back to that in a second. But the right-hand side, this thing called Amy, they are using data and technology to build and acquire companies. So one of the things Yaniv would do is he would go and say, cool, thanks to all the availability of this data, which is a big theme we want everybody to take away from, he could identify gaps in the market where there was opportunities for growth. Where the competitive set is either strong but small that he might want to acquire, or weak and he might want to launch his own product. He would often go and use ratings and reviews to identify better enhancements to existing products that consumers were looking for, both on search demand and the ratings reviews. He'd go right back to the same manufacturers who make the name brand products and have them made from those same manufacturers to compete with them. And in fact, one point, because he does a lot of small blinds, he's just the number one mini fridge seller on Amazon and on Walmart. And he was just working around this stuff. But this is a consumer goods company. So James, if you go to the next slide, here's two of the brands they have. The one on the left is one that he acquired, Mueller. The one on the right, Home Labs, is the one he built from scratch. You can see a very similar thing that you saw with those small agile brands. You've got a D2C presence. That's the main page where you can buy directly from them, and they are building brands there. The bottom left-hand for each of those is their Amazon Premier pages. So their digital storefront, sorry. So they are really trying to build up the brand and really invest in channels like Amazon and say, you know what, I need my brand experience as strong as I can be there as well. And then the other image is from Walmart, right? So he has continued to move across the retail channels as he built them up. He doesn't have 2,000 products in these two brands. He has multiple brands. And so this is, now for many of you, he's not in your space unless you're in home appliances, but for many of you, this is the threat. It's not just the smaller agile brands who can work kind of like Quest Nutrition did. It's these digitally data and technology native brands who are reinventing the space. Because similar to the small agile brands, they don't have the legacy walls that hold them back. They're able to do this stuff in a little bit more collaborative way. And so if we go to the next slide, this is our advice on this topic. It's not just that you need to get brand and creative into your channels, it's that you need to rethink the way you operate here. Your org models and op models have to change to address this. So there's three things. I'm going to go around this wheel real quick. We're going to skip listen and kind of do it on the circle back, but create. The first thing you need to do is you need to have brand and creative talent in the commerce space. And what you're going to find when you first do that is a lot of brand and creative talent have no idea about commerce. They don't understand the challenges that Matt was bringing up about the fact that the content has different requirements, the algorithms are different. It's highly unique, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, Target, Kroger's, et cetera. And you need creative talent that actually understands the channel, but comes with that skill set. And you're going to have to find them or build them, but they belong supporting commerce. Second, you got to syndicate and distribute this content everywhere. I think that's a no-brainer. But to the point Matt was bringing up earlier, it's got to be scalable. Right. So, having 4 different PIMs because, I got one through an acquisition, I got one specifically for Peapod, I got all this. It's no longer going to be the case. I mean, we've moved out of surviving the rush that we had. We've got to move to more scalable solutions to ensure that you fill it. It's not uncommon for me to go and find product pages where if I click one side of the product, I get this great product page. And if I click the other side, there's nothing there. Because it's so difficult to do that syndicate and distribute well. And that's both the architecture side and the operations side, right? You're going to have to start scaling with onshore, nearshore, offshore resources. The needs are getting bigger. If you're going to do it cost effectively, you need a scalable model. And then finally, test and optimize. This is the digital world. And physical testing can be kind of tricky. It's not that people don't do it. It's just a little more slow and monotonous. It's not in digital. You can learn fast, and you should learn fast. The question I hate the most is when someone asks me something like, is it worth putting the brand in there? Have you tested it? What kind of results did you get? It's the wrong question. First of all, if you're not going to put brand in this channel, then just go ahead and admit that you're going to do low price and you're going to be a commodity. The better question is, how should I test? What content works the best, right? It shouldn't be a case that you're just trying to perform based on the SEO. You should be testing and optimizing this all the time. And that leads back to listen, because listening isn't about listening to the results of the test. It's to remind everybody. And it amazes me, I'm sure many of you do this, but it's amazing to me how many don't. But in digital commerce, you get thousands of digital Post-it notes from consumers telling you what they like and dislike, whether it's about your product, about fulfillment. Sometimes, and we even had a case where we found one that was a conspiracy theory had formed over years because the content never addressed the issue. It would just keep coming back. And it was the most liked or most helpful type of review that they always got because it would pop up pretty frequently. So if you're not listening to what your consumers are saying, there's a huge risk there, not just for people like Tyrion to learn and develop better products than you, which you should be doing, but also that your content becomes an active voice for the brand, right? If someone has an issue and you've addressed it, you should be talking through your content on that, which means it needs to be fed back into the creative briefs that keeps this cycle going. So again, the big message here is you can't keep doing things the way you're doing it. Hopefully many of you are changing, but you have to rethink the org and op models because it is too often that I sit down with marketing or I sit down with commerce and the other group's not in the room at the same time. And that can't keep going forward. All right, so last section, if we go to the next slide, this is probably the biggest one, right? So adapting to the evolving retail model. And so let's talk about what we mean by evolving retail model. If we go to the next one, James, this is how the world has worked for a very long time. And I've oversimplified this, right? We've left out wholesalers, distributors, just keeping it simple. Brands need to be on the shelf, right? The Oreos, the Huggies, the Coca-Cola, the Tide, because it brought shoppers into the store so the retailer can make money. So the value chain worked left to right? Brands brought value to the retailer, retailers brought value to the shoppers, and profitability went right to left. Shoppers is who the retailer made money off. That was their customers. And retailers were the customers to the brands. That's who they made money off of. The problem is that the margins are small. Right? I used to work for HEB. I did all their supply chain work for many years, designed and implemented that stuff. And I don't think it's a secret to say that margins in the stores were 1% to 2%. They take on tons of risk. They have the inventory, they have the real estate, they have the consumer relations. It's a tremendous thing that they have to take advantage. And the truth is, there hasn't been a lot of innovation in that space in a long time. And so the growth is very limited. I think the last big one was things like Geek Squad, which God knows how long ago. So if we go to the next slide, this is the new model that we're watching for them. Amazon launched it, Walmart is replicating it, targeting others who are trying to find their flavor of it. And we're seeing it not just in traditional big box and grocery retail, we're seeing it in special retailers as well. It's why they launch these marketplaces. It reverses the value chain. Right? Amazon, if you ask them, they will happily tell you they do not want to make money off shoppers. That's not their goal. They want as many shoppers on their platform as possible. They want them as engaged as possible. That's why they launch Prime and everything else, so they can make money off of the brands, you all, right? So they make money off of paid media, cloud-based services, insights, content production services, fulfillment. And by the way, if you don't think you're paying for fulfillment because you're on the vendor side, I think most of you know that's simply not true anymore. All the fees you pay, not to mention the compliance stuff, they make their money back on fulfillment. So what's the net effect is that it creates more revenue opportunities for this model. Now we're going to go into that in a little more detail. It shifts risk and cost off the books for them from the P&L perspective, and it creates greater agility. And we see this all the time. The stuff like the companies like Criterion and Quest Nutrition, they're paying attention. As consumers search for new things, they can go to market faster with new options, new flavors, new variations, creating greater agility that the retailer doesn't have to invest in. In fact, if I want to launch a hot sauce here in Austin, where I live, I could launch a hot sauce and get it on a competitive shelf digitally, a year faster than I would have ever been able to do it in a physical store at Walmart. And that's that agility that it's providing to these retailers. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to show an example. And by the way, everybody we highlight here is doing phenomenal work. Like this is bottled water, but the work that Dannon does here is fantastic. But I want to highlight this little almost Tom Sawyer trick here of paying for the privilege to do the work. You see managing the store shelf. I mean, they've got the full width. Remember, I've shrunk this down, but that's the below the fold there, that long skinny picture underneath the product page there. They've got full size video. They've got the carousel. Even if you're using basic A+ content, you're not having to pay Amazon, Walmart, Target, et cetera, you still are paying, right? Because you do all the work. You have to build all that content. You have to manage the page. So if you are paying for the higher end stuff, you're literally paying for the privilege to do all the work. Digital storefront. There's digital storefronts for bottled water, Cheerios, Oreos, Huggies diapers. It's amazing what we build digital storefronts from. You would never do that in physical store. You'd never have a store within a store for bottled water. We do it for everything now. And again, you pay for the privilege to do the work. So they've offloaded cost and risk from the P&L by you doing the work. They've increased revenue by you paying for this feature to do it because it'll affect search results now. In-store promotions, these were, and I can't remember what I had here, but I think one of them, the top one is bottled water, natural spring water, and then the last one was Evian natural spring water. So Evian probably wants to compete on all three of those, and you can see who's winning those bids right now, at least when I'm going in there searching for those things. And you're not only paying co-op dollars to do advertising, you do all the work. It's a day by day, hour by hour knife fight. And the worst part is it's not like the old world where there was a category for bottled water that you competed on. The categories and the shelves are defined by consumer search. So there literally is a shelf for spring natural spring water. There's a shelf for Evian natural spring water. And you want to bid on those, you're going to have to pay for that. And so this is a brilliant model where, again, you're doing all the heavy lifting for the advertising and you're paying for the privilege to do it. And then finally, the consumer side of the relationship. If you're not answering the Q&A or the consumer reviews, nobody is. And this is a huge risk. That's why I was so impressed seeing Quest Nutrition, the Home Kitchen. You'll notice these small brands, they get in there and they will answer the Q&A directly because it'll say it's from the manufacturer. And owning that is really important. But again, there's a cost associated with doing that, with you using the resource to do it. So it's not a surprise to anyone on this call, I'm sure, but you are shifting into doing a lot of work to manage your business. This is no longer you selling your product to a retailer. These new types of retailers, and not all of them are doing this, but these new type of retailers have offloaded a lot of work onto you, and it's less about you selling your product to them and more about you selling your own product within their channel. That's the brilliance of the shift for them on the P&L side. But there is a silver lining to all this, besides the fact having some control. If we go to the next slide, there is a tremendous amount of data that starts to show up that people don't always pay attention to. And I didn't even highlight this, but the destin at the top, the promotion that's running on this page is data in itself. It's just not about the specific product, but the content is visible, the assortment, the fulfillment options, the pricing, inventory obviously for OPD, or in this case, OPD, curbside or online pickup delivery, the ratings, reviews. There's tons of data here on this digitally available. And note that at the very bottom there, it's at a local store level. So not everything is local store level, but knowing the available inventory for curbside, knowing the pricing for that product, knowing which ones are pickup only is localized. So the amount of data that is now accessible thanks to curbside moves beyond Walmart.com level to Walmart local store level, which is extreme power, especially when you can see it for you and your competitors. If we go to the next slide, this is just showing an example here. You got, Huggies on the left, Pampers on the right. And one of the things, just to highlight on like inventory position, Huggies says it's only 5 left. And maybe in the Q&A section, we can talk about this if somebody's curious, but having designed supply chain systems and implemented in the past, the idea retailers are separating out curbside versus in-store inventory is just asinine is the only word I can come up with for it, to be honest. It's a mistake. There's no reason they can't combine those and put the appropriate buffers in there. But you'll see that Huggies there has only 5 left for pickup, and then everything else is next day delivery. Pampers actually doesn't have any available for curbside. And why, there's a chance that Huggies should be running an advertisement on the top of that page saying, by the way, pick up your Huggies today at the local whatever, and have a play on curbside. Sometimes it's a great one to kind of use. So the idea that you can see inventory position at a local level has a tremendous amount of power for how you act, if you can act on it fast enough. Pricing strategy. Pricing is a tough lever to move, but just having visibility into pricing by channel, by retail channel and by region could be extremely powerful to watch and see what your competitors are doing. It could guide your strategy. Any changements in their assortment and fulfillment options, right? So right now that's the situation with Pampers, but they can change it. And what would you do differently if you saw that? Or what would you play up knowing what they have? New campaigns or new content that could be bringing up new feature visualization that you may not have been aware of, or what time they launched it. And to be honest, commerce is often disconnected from the other channels, so it's good to see that. And then finally, review feedback. I mentioned the conspiracy theory one. We had another one where, to be honest, they had this wonderful feature of their product. Customers talked about it and they, like in their own words, and our client didn't realize it, and their competitor did, and basically owned it across not just commerce, but Google and everything else. And it was a huge mess because it was actually something they were better at, but didn't know how to really play off of it. It was sitting in the feedback all the time. So if you saw that your competitor had negative feedback that you wanted to go after, or a new feature or benefit of your product that people are starting to recognize, how would you respond to that? And so all this data is there. What needs to happen next is to move to a more systematic way to leverage this data for category growth, right? I mean, it's there. Now, what's the next step to add it? And so we've created a very simple visual to kind of help you think about these 3 stages we just talked about, the 3 challenges. So if you go to the next slide, James, again, this is meant to be very simplistic, but this is the way to think about the future in this space. And we're going to go bottom to top, not top to bottom. So content architecture and capabilities meaning like content production, things like that. That's all about cost-effective scale. I got to feed all those systems above it, including my direct-to-consumer channel. I got to create the content, product information stuff, and I've got to pump it all into those channels. I need to clean that up, make it scalable, and run it as cost-effectively as I can, because each one of those channels have some nuances, but that layer should be consistent across the bottom. Middle layer. Something I did bring up about Tyrion that is really powerful is not only are they using data to launch products, they're using data and technology to optimize marketing in these channels. So what do I mean by that? If you look at the way traditional media had worked, you could have done traditional advertising, digital media, social media, whatever it might be. Your hope is to know whether someone walked into a store and bought it. The difference with retail media is that it's part of a closed ecosystem, right? If I run an ad in Amazon to drive someone to a product page in Amazon where I can convert them with a subscription model or a purchase and then measure the effectiveness of it, I literally have a completely closed ecosystem to know what's working and what's not. Now, these systems are all maturing. Don't get me wrong. It's taking some time, but that's where Tyrion has a huge head start, is they realize not only is this system that is closed so you can measure and test automatically, but just as importantly, it's highly complex, right? Natural spring water, Evian natural spring water, bottled water. There's so many shelves to compete on. Which one should I be competing on? Which ones can I win on? Which ones can I get the return on? And the big question in this middle space that Matt and I have been talking to a lot of people about, they've been trying to wrestle with this to his point, is if I put $1 into Amazon, do I get $1.20 back? Or is it more like 50 cents? And I think we all know it's closer to 50 cents right now. And so as we look across that middle layer, you're going to have to optimize within each of these channels with an ROI mindset. For every dollar I put in a Walmart, I better be getting that $1.20 back. How do I know how much am I spending? What does my return look like? How do I optimize and automate better? And it has to be within Walmart, because the Walmart system is completely different from the Amazon one and the Target one. So unlike the bottom layer, which is about cost and scale, this layer is about ROI, right? And I need to have the platforms to automate this as much as possible. And then at the top, this gets to that silver lining we talked about with data, the fact that tracking, reporting, insights, rules management, if I can see what my data looks like and my competitors' data looks like, it's not, and it's already available, by the way, keep that in mind. It's not like we're talking about something coming in the future. It's already available. What's coming in the future is the fact that that data will be in the physical stores too. And we're already seeing that as many of the stores are moving to becoming fulfillment centers like Walmart's already starting to do. Amazon's already done with Whole Foods. They become almost like an experiential fulfillment center. If I do curbside at Walmart, I'm not using the Walmart to shop in. My shopping was completely digital. I'm just using Walmart as fulfillment. Well, if they do more pick pack in there, they digitize the inside of the store, even more data for me to work with. But even right now, you have a ton to work with on yours and your competitor data. Again, it doesn't take a lot to understand why automation, AI, rules management would allow you mentally to know what in the world's going on so you can act on it and then eventually move towards more faster movement. So for example, that inventory management example, if I saw one of my competitors having supply chain issues and know that they were running out of inventory on Amazon, I might want to increase my media spend there. I might want to let my manufacturing supply chain know because they have different pack sizes potentially to actually start producing a slightly different one, offload a little bit of my Walmart inventory to move towards Amazon to go make a move there to grab that extra market share, because digital market share is stickier than the physical market share, as we've seen with reordering and subscription models. And I need to do that quickly. And that's going to come from building the digital commerce control tower that leverages the data to act on that information. So I'm going to hand it back to Matt. He's going to look at it on a little bit bigger, broader scale real quick. James, can you go to the next slide?
Thanks, Jared. So once I've got kind of that closed loop for commerce, as Jared described, how do I think about using the insights from this control tower as a competitive advantage for the rest of the enterprise, right? So now I'm going to have these insights around what the shoppers are saying by product. down to a much more granular level. I can start to target them and drive personalized experiences in an omnichannel way. I can amplify these same learnings into social and everything I'm doing from a marketing and engagement perspective. Across the rest of the enterprise, I can use these learnings to think about growth by category with my customer into these revised joint business to kind of joint experience planning conversations with my retailers. I can rethink SRM. I can shift my spending to where that ROI is more effective for me, where I need to play in the future. I can do that in a much more dynamic way. And then I'm also tied into supply chain, right? So I'm not promoting as heavily if I'm out of stock on something. And so I'm making those linkages. And then I'm also then amplifying the manufacturing and my capacity to once I know where that demand is coming from this intelligence tower, I'm making sure I've got the capacity on the back end to fulfill it. So just an example of commerce, how integrated it is. But more importantly, the opportunity for CPGs is to really power this notion of an agile enterprise for advantage in the market. Okay, go down one more. I think that was it in terms of our prepared content. So I think we've got a few left for a Q&A, right, Tom?
Yes, we do. And thank you, Matt and Jared, for such an insightful presentation. As you mentioned, we've reached the question and answer portion. And as a reminder, if you have a question for either speaker, please just submit it using the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We had a few questions come in during the session, and then even when folks registered. And just looking at the list of questions, I'm going to start with one that's sort of at a higher level, just to sort of get things situated. But you talked a little bit about some of the CPG brands, their direct consumer type model. If you are a CPG brand and you want to engage in direct to consumer, what are the foundational elements that you need to be thinking about, and how do you get that started?
Sure, I can start. Maybe Jared can pile on. And I'd say the approach to D2C is varying a lot by, call it subcategory within CPG, right? For health and personal care and beauty, it's all in on D2C. And driving those experiences both in store and online off that consumer data, which means I need a robust, scalable, consumer, 360 degrees consumer data platform, right? That's a critical enabler, even for the folks that sit more in food or beverage or alco bev. They're starting to also build these platforms, so I get to understand and know who my consumers and shoppers are. And I can use D2C as more of a test and learn engine, right, that I can then amplify with the rest of my retail business. So I'd say it's a bit nuanced by category, but there's a few themes and capabilities that cut across. Jared, feel free to add to that one.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add is and I'm saying this, and it's going to sound like it's a joke if you haven't heard this. Hopefully everybody's heard the term crap product. It's the Amazon term, can't realize a profit, CRAP. To Matt's point, it does depend on by segment. I mean, if you're in the beauty brands, we got a high-end product, low weight per dollar, it makes a ton of sense. You get over to the beverage side, where you've got, high weight, low cost, shipping, like the size of it, fulfillment, it becomes much more complicated, right? And I also think it has a lot to do with the value proposition. But to Matt's point, there's a ton of value in the first party data. There's a lot of talk about disintermediation, which is not something I wouldn't say I would, it is important. It's just that point about the retail model being changed, I think is the bigger message, right? So you look at this and go, if I'm going to think about the idea that the Amazon and the Walmarts of the world are now focused on making money off of me than me making money off of them, first of all, I'm going to have to segment my customer base more intelligently as I build out my sales model. But it also means that the calculus around first setting my D2C changes, because it used to be, well, I'm just not going to make that much money. And now you're looking to go, are you really making a lot of money off of Amazon? And at least with first party data, you're getting to your loyalists, which is super important. You're getting to test and learn, and you're building that first party data for continuing to build the engagement. So couldn't agree more with Matt. I just wanted to call out that crap product because that is usually where we see a threshold of going, do you want to do D2C? And we're talking North America, by the way. Other markets, Southeast Asia, India, Latin, it becomes a little different. But in North America, the D2C line is usually where you kind of define the crap product. I'm not saying you can't go below it, but you need to be sincere about the value prop and not just think it's a profit channel because it's not. So.
No, that makes perfect sense. A couple questions. You mentioned data. A couple questions around that front and try to synthesize a couple of different thoughts here and to something coherent. But I think that as you look to the platforms and the retailers, there's a degree of leverage that they have insofar as having access to a lot of that demand information, the consumer, in many different ways. They have that data at their fingertips. And so if you are a CPG and you're looking to leverage that data, again, not to just like do the where do you start thing, but what are the steps necessary to get access and work with retailers to utilize that data effectively? And then are there aspects internally and from an organizational standpoint, from a talent standpoint, other areas of your organization to actually use it well, right? Because you can send someone over a ton of data, and if they don't have the capacity to do it, they're not going to have any ability to leverage that. So just some questions there around data use.
Right. I saw, Matt, if you're okay with me going first on this, I saw the thing on Nielsen. No, I don't think this is the end of Nielsen, but it does beg the question of what is the right source of data? I want to answer in a little bit more provocative way because I remember with one of the clients, this was a few years ago, we were talking and they were like, well, the problem is they were in the sporting goods space, right? And they're like, well, the person who owns the sporting goods doesn't want to talk to the person or share any data because then the person who owns, Academy will see that data and they don't want each other to see each other's data. And I was going, yeah, but that's sell-through data. It's not super powerful. What about all the consumer reviews? And they hadn't even wrapped their head around what data is now publicly available from a consumer perspective they can tap into. And I still think it's one of the most underutilized sources of data. So we're just starting to see people think about that. But I would say you need creative people on the data side. Right? If all you're going to do is go, cool, the way we've always been measuring it, we're going to add curbside to it, and we're going to add, click and collect. And by the way, we need to be all thinking too, digital commerce is not ship to home. That's just one piece of it. Curbside is digital commerce. Instacart is digital. It's just a different fulfillment method. I'm still shopping online. You're just fulfilling it locally. But you not only need to be creative about the sources of the data, you need to be creative about how you get it. So one of the tricks that Yaniv has been very open about what he does with Octarian is if he wants to get in a new category, because of the power of these systems, he'll go buy and sell someone else's product. He will literally buy other people's product and sell it because then he gets into the category space. He starts to see the sales numbers. He can then estimate the projection from there, the size of the market. There's a lot of brilliance in this space on the data side for being crafty around what these systems really give you access to. That comes more indirectly. So when it comes to data, I think the most important message is we're at the very beginning of what's possible. And you need people not to go and say, how do I add to my old model, but to start getting creative about what the new model for data is in this space and not be afraid to disrupt the old model. I don't know if that really answers it, Tom, but to me, that's the challenge with it. Too often we stick to what we've been doing forever.
I agree with you, Jared. I think it's not necessarily a replace, but at least in the immediate near to midterm, it's more of an and model, right? So an Alcobev client of ours, they're bringing in Square data, all these other kind of sources of new insights to understand that consumer at a much more granular, level than they have in the past.
Yeah. Specific question, just building a little on that, as you utilize data more, as you have access to it, as you share that across industry, across retail platforms, what are the steps that can be taken to tighten data security and sort of view that the provision of security as an enabler for creating scalable e-commerce?
Yeah, I think as we think about data, if I just take this integrated SRM example we just went through, it was all over the place, right? So agencies had some parts of the internal organization had some, other parts of the internal organization had some. And so I now need to think about, how do I bring all that together in a secure way? How do I start to make sense of, customer, product, master, everything, right? So I can make sense of it and keep it secure. I now need to think about what are the platforms that are good at combining those data sources that can scale, right? So I think you need to do your diligence around the cloud platforms and what can scale and build that foundation that Jeriad was talking about earlier, right? And get that out of the way.
Makes perfect sense. Jeriad, do you have any thoughts on the data security side?
No, I agree.
Not pressuring you.
Nothing to add from what Matt said.
Got it. One of the things that I've at least observed is that, as you see a explosion of different fulfillment models, right, that you see direct to consumer, you see click and collect, a lot of those changes in the short term are being experimented with by the retailer, right? They're the ones that are toying with, well, do you have everyone stand over here? Do you have them pull into a parking spot and text us? Like, they're the ones that are operationalizing that. As you look to the growth of e-commerce, could you talk a little bit about how some of these changes that are initially in terms of the consumer experience, the using this data effectively, how that translates operationally up through to the CPG, and if they should expect needing to meet different needs on the part of retailers and the part of platform providers, just from a pure supply chain operation side, right? That how you service and fulfill even Whole Foods a couple of years ago is different than Whole Foods as a de facto fulfillment center for Amazon.
Yeah, and you're seeing different demands placed from the retailers, right? In terms of on the supply chain side, that are just incredible demands, right? So almost all of the leading CPGs we're working with right now are investing heavily in integrated demand planning capabilities powered by artificial intelligence, and it's becoming more holistic across what was traditionally a supply organization and a sales organization arguing about a forecast to really an integrated science-based S&OP plan, right? In order to meet these retail demands, that's kind of the only way clients are able to navigate it with this kind of intelligence, right?
Right. And do you see any differentiation there across sort of categories or types of goods, right? That if you really reliant on cold chain, or you're moving refrigerated products, that's different than if you're just to use your example of a luxury high-end personal care item, maybe your types of fulfillment, I would assume, are going to be different, and the operational changes are going to be different as you go down this path of e-commerce. Absolutely.
And we've done the economics on, multiple client kind of D2C models, right? Some heavy in protein, some refrigerated, right? And you need to think about that portfolio and where does it make sense or not, right? Not a lot of our clients want to get into money losing businesses and expand D2C, right? Unless they can tie those insights into another part of their business, right? So, it absolutely, the economics are very, very different, right, within the different subcategories.
Right. All right. I think we have time for one more question, and I was just going through the chat and didn't see any.
OTC, I wouldn't say there's any unique, just to make sure we covered it.
Yep. It
really is almost identical. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of the beauty products because often it's higher cost, low weight, has a lot of the same flex, but I would argue the only thing we've seen in OTC is they really haven't moved as aggressively as they probably could have, but many of them are really strong. You see great brand awareness in the channels. They're really kind of playing it up. But it really operates very similar to the other consumer goods in the space.
Got it. All right. Did you mention maybe time for one more question? And this is one that sort of I've just been keeping in my back pocket. As you look to, so much of the innovation I would say it's unpredictable, right? But who would have seen the types of e-commerce growth happen? Who would have seen the pandemic accelerate that by 5 to 10 years? Some of this is asking you guys to look into a very murky crystal ball and come up with something. But if you were looking to the future of e-commerce, especially for CPG, and you were saying this is going to be a game changer, this is going to be that next advance, what are you guys thinking about, especially for the CPG companies?
Yeah, maybe I'll start and let you.
I'll keep this one short, and because I'm almost wanting just to kind of brag on ourselves a little bit. A little over a year ago, we did a CMO community call with 140 CMOs, and we told them three things were coming: the shift in media dollars to commerce channel, the war for the digital shelf, because we said this is going to be a permanent shift, and because you could see it, we saw what happened with SARS 18 years ago. We knew that it wasn't going to be, a 30-day thing, that it would create these permanence in certain consumer behaviors. And a lot of people thought we were a little bit too aggressive. But the third thing we said this is the thing that's coming later that you need to be careful of. And I would say this is the biggest thing right now, is the war for digital talent. And I'll never forget, I was so proud of us for saying it, because you could see it, and I kept telling them, you're going to first see it, because especially once COVID really kind of got going, not only has everybody got to accelerate their plans that they didn't really have in place yet. That meant that they often didn't have a plan to scale it. They didn't have the expertise in-house quite yet. So everybody was going to be battling for talent. What we're dealing with now is travel, entertainment, and non-essential retail comes back as vaccines become more prevalent. That war for digital talent gets even more chaotic. And so I would assume if you're on this call and you are not dealing with that yet, I'd be shocked. Just want to highlight that as an industry issue that is not going to go away in 6 months, because the supply side wasn't there for it either. So sorry, Matt, thank you for letting me just throw that in first, because I think it is one of the biggest misses. People are, I got to get the tech right, and I got to get this right. And then you're looking to go, you got to get the talent right too. And it's not as easy and a quick a fix, because the supply is not there to support the demand that got accelerated.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think Jeriad mentioned this earlier, but we didn't get into detail, but looking to kind of Asia Pacific, right, as kind of more of future, right? I think there's lessons to be learned from there. It could be get a whole separate CBA topic on that with you guys on that one. And then I think the other thing we're seeing with a lot of our clients, especially in Europe, is kind of changing the game via marketplaces. Again, probably warrants its own conversation, but as I think about how do I team together differently against the likes of Amazon and some of these retailers that are out there.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna pile on Matt real quick. I know we're almost out of time, but that last thing that Matt and I talked about, the data-driven systematic solution, I would argue this is not a new topic. The difference is that the data and the capabilities now exist, and especially when we think about that war on digital talent, your ability to move towards more automation, more integrated front end and back end to your supply chain manufacturing through these demand signals has never been more critical. So you're looking going, I not only have to do it to compete, because I can't treat these channels in silos like I've always done, but the truth is the talent is not going to come and save me. I'm going to have to move into a more systematic, efficient way of doing this. So that's the one I would say the brands that go that direction are going to have a huge head start on everybody else for those various reasons.
Makes perfect sense, and I couldn't agree more. Do you all have any closing remarks for listeners?
Just thank you for the opportunity, and feel free to reach out. Happy to a lot of great questions and engagement here, so happy to dialogue further with this community.
Yeah, well, this is a topic we love, so feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you so much, Matt and Jeriad, just for taking the time, and thank you to Accenture for their partnership with consumer brands. We look forward to sharing additional insights from Accenture during future sessions and other initiatives. And so just want to thank everyone for today's session. Absolutely feel free to get in touch to learn more.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks all.
Yep. Have a great one.